Hello everybody, welcome to the Coaching Conversation. I'm Graham Wiley and I've been coaching business leaders for the last 2 decades. In this series we're going to explore some of the things I've seen and learned in that 2 decades and hopefully help you see how you can become more focused, more effective and hopefully happier in your life. So it's now time to sit back, relax and enjoy the Coaching Conversation. This is the Coaching Conversation, and I'm joined today by Matt Hayes.
Hey everyone.
Matt, please, before we get going, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm an enterprise agile coach. I also work with executives, coaching them too. I've had all sorts of roles from a geeky programmer right through to a CTO. And so what I found most interesting is about changing culture, which is how I got into coaching in the first place. And I work with some startups, but I've also worked with some large organisations in the financial industry and such. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you. It's very interesting. You talked about change there, and obviously coaching is all about helping people change. And one of the things we want to talk about today is habits.
Yeah.
And habits are clearly the things that are difficult to change because they become habitual, which is a bit of a surprise, really, isn't it? Now, in your experience, Matt, when you're coaching people, how do you identify that perhaps they've got a habit they need to give some thought to or perhaps adapt? What do you see when they turn up?
Yeah, often they don't notice they've got a habit. There's just some poor behaviour. And probably they haven't noticed that either. They're noticing that what's going on around them isn't congruent with what they would like to have happen. And so they may have some self-awareness that they're causing it, or they may not. And as you spend time talking, you can start to ask the questions around what impact is that having on the situation. And they can then start to make a decision, is it something about them, or is it something that they need to react differently? But usually it's about seeing the world you want to be, right?
Okay.
Being the world you want to see.
There's a lot of neuroscience around habits and habit forming and changing. Are you familiar with that?
I am. I think we all have our own habits. What I notice is how easy it is to notice bad ones and how hard it is to form new positive ones. It feels like you have a vision. Let's say I would like to lose weight. That seems like a straightforward thing to do, but obviously there's lots of things going on that stop you. So habit forming allows you to create some constructive habits, some constructive short things to get towards a vision, basically. Yeah. And then by building these up, you can basically affect positive change or deconstruct a negative one, which may be a new habit to swap out an old one.
The science that I've read about and been taught around is that the neural pathways in the brain have been built up over decades through your life, and obviously they're born out of the origins of fight or flight, and therefore if you're going to adopt new habits you need to create new neural pathways, and that means, exactly as you just said, you've got to do things differently, and by doing things differently you teach your brain to do things differently, to react to life differently. And these little steps that you were talking about, they are the way you are reprogramming your brain to react to life and to create these new neural pathways and ultimately these new habits. When your coaching experience, when you've been one-to-one with coaches with a need to develop new habits, how have you helped them with that?
Well, like I said at the start, the first thing is to identify what it is they want to achieve. I think the simplest thing to do is pick something small that works towards it. Maybe that's about just simply identifying a negative behaviour and catching it, or maybe it's something more fundamental, but you then end up helping them identify this trigger point so that they are able to make a different decision. What I then coach around is, let's say you could catch that now. What is it you would like to do? And I help them explore different opportunities. That maybe it's something small or maybe it's something big, depending on what they think they could do. And then it's basically about repetition. So once they've done something, The hard part is if it's not a positive experience for them, it's about helping them get back on the horse again. But maybe it's because the behaviour that they've picked is probably a bit too strong for them. If we imagine going to a gym, for example, and they pick up too heavy weights to start with, but if they were to get used to picking up smaller weights, and then gradually they can grow that, the reward is probably not as quick, but they're getting into the habit of doing something that is contributing to where they want to go.
It's really interesting. It brought to mind an example of one of my clients. He was very comfortable. His habits made him very comfortable in not being particularly open and vulnerable, not being particularly user-friendly. So he used the authority of his position to get stuff done rather than make people participate and engage. And clearly that's a self-limiting aspect in career development. It's going to mean he's not going to get as far as he wants to go. And actually encouraging him to take the risks of not being like that. So in a meeting, actually ask people if they'd like a cup of coffee and then go and get it for them. Seems like a small thing, but for him was a big thing. And clearly, as he was starting to do it, he was getting the reaction from other people of what's happened to him? Why is he behaving differently? And you can go further with these examples with him as a case, but he persevered through it. And it did take him, I guess, nearly 2 months before people began to recognize what he was trying to do and to welcome it and embrace it and give him a chance. But he did have to push through it. As you said, it was a tough weight. He was picking up a heavier weight than perhaps most people thought he was going to. Are you enjoying the coaching conversation? Do please check out our website, theexecutivemindset.co.uk. So that was an example from my experience. Matt, what's happened for you? Have you got an example?
I've got a personal example, and then I've also used this with lots of other people. I was working in an environment where I couldn't scale myself, and I had the feeling that I was doing too much, because when I would step back, things wouldn't happen. And I was introduced to a tool to help balance collaboration. And the first part of that tool is understanding what are you observing, and the second part is what is your reaction in response to it. And this is like a habit forming process, because when I mapped out the different types of interactions I would have, they were often me organizing the group. And there's other ways to deal with that, is let them organize themselves, give them enough motivation to help themselves or to do something different, or maybe they're just lacking in information. And so the first part is observing something and catching that. That was a really small step. And rather than saying, I'm going to go in and fix this, I would then go and explore what I could find out about the situation. And from that point, I was then able to make a decision about what kind of support or what kind of intervention, if any, I would need. And what I find when I work with leaders is that they don't notice that they're acting in a command and control way, that they're trying to organize everything, and then they're wondering why things don't happen when they're not around. Sometimes it's about the lack of information, but their judgment could be that these aren't good enough, they couldn't do it without me. And often when that habit of intervening is so regular, the team feel like, well, what's the point? Because you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so the first habit is observing it. The second habit is then, how can I react? Do I need to react the usual way, or can I react differently? And then gradually the reward starts to come, because there's a real amount of space now. If I'm not intervening and I'm starting to trust the right things are happening, the teams can start to grow. And then in my example, I was able to take on other roles, do some other stuff, form a new company in another part of the world. But none of that would have been possible if I'd stayed with my initial habit of, if it's broken, people aren't showing up right. So yeah, it's really interesting how many ways the good and the bad habits can break and be formed.
Thanks for that, Matt. That's pretty good.
Thank you.
We could go on with this conversation for hours, I guess. Thanks for coming to this edition of the Coaching Conversation, and I look forward to seeing you here again soon.
Thank you, Graham.
So, there you have it, the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hope you found it interesting. Hope you found it useful. You can find out more about our coaching programs at theexecutivemindset.co.uk. If you want to reach out, you can send me an email at theexecutivemindset@sagegreen.com. You can book a free 30-minute session at theexecutivemindset.co.uk, which will give you a really good feel for how coaching could help you. And if you've really enjoyed the session, do please rate us, do please give us a review. And nothing more for me to say other than see you next time.